Hey everybody, how's it going?
Hi guys.
Hey Fab.
Back.
Hey Alyssa.
All right.
Hello.
This is going to be an interesting show for sales leaders because obviously, a big part of the revenue engine is marketing, and from personal experience, and I might be wrong, I feel like sales leaders often neglect the marketing side of things, and often both teams don't completely work together as they should. And obviously, like, sales leaders are busy, right? And they have their own thing, and they're managing their teams, and they're making sure that they and and it's not their role to think about marketing. But listen, I'm happy you're here because I really want to make sure that they understand what's going into a marketing plan and why they should care about this.
And
So,
Fab,
yeah.
I wanted to say I resent that comment, having been a sales leader, but I really have to say I resemble that comment. So, in my past life when I was running a big team, what we ended up doing is, we saw marketing as this mysterious thing that happened down dark corridors. So I think it's really good to demystify it for the sales community so they understand what's going on. And whoever wants to start their own business out there too, it'll be very much helped by this. So yeah, absolutely. All right.
Yes. Yeah, it's funny. I think about sales and marketing almost like two neighbors who own farms, right? One's like, I don't know, a cattle farm, and one's a grain farm or corn farm, and they think they're not connected, but really, like, they share the land and the cows graze in the cornfields, and like there's so many connections, but they both feel like they're in these separate spaces and units.
Yet they're not.
And there's not it's not necessarily true. And I think the bigger the organization, the more siloed these teams get. So especially when you're a small organization or you're a part of a growing or a rapidly growing organization, it's important to build that connection in terms of your processes and systems between the two groups right off the bat, because then you have this very fluid relationship where you're sharing information, you're sharing insights, because ultimately you're two cogs in the same wheel, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And marketing's job is to bring in leads that are valuable and qualified for the sales team to then very easily and efficiently convert into a client. And so if marketing's not doing its job of bringing qualified leads, and sales isn't doing its job of being aware and informing and helping to share information with marketing can't necessarily know that they're bringing in the right people for them. And so the onus is on both teams, I think, to transfer insights. Marketing likes to go and do their work. So they go do focus groups and testing, and we talked about our customer, and we figure out who our customer is, yada, yada. But really, sales has an even better insight, depending on the industry, of who that prospect really is. It's interesting when you get into products. So, we come from more like telecom, and I come from packaged goods, and that's a little different because the sales client is a retailer and not necessarily the end user. Marketing cares about the end user, sales cares about most part the retailer. But most organizations, especially when they're B2B, the two are the same. The prospects are the same. So your client is the same as the people marketing is trying to drive leads for. And that's where it's really important for those two teams to share insights and connect.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and I find what's interesting is that, because at the same time, and it's true, like, if I put a RevOps hat on, like, that's what you want, right? It's like a whole circle of, like, the marketing and the sales and the service, and they're all kind of looping in together. But at the same time, they're still very distinct practices, right? Like, selling is very one-on-one, one-to-one. Marketing, I mean, we could get into the details. Obviously there's more ABM strategies that could be a bit closer to the one-to-one, but overall it's like one-to-many. And so there's still a lot of differences. And so I think the challenge is bridging that gap, and and that's what we're hoping to do a bit with the show, which is like to show the sales leader, like, hey, this is what your neighbors are doing, right? Like, it's the end of the year, right? We're recording this on December 9th. Like, marketing teams are working hard at planning next year. And I think sales leaders need to understand what's going on in the room next door. And hopefully it's not the room next door. Hopefully they're maybe involved in that conversation as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
it's a good point. And I think too, what's helped to bring sales and marketing together, I think, is a lot of the automation and the software, the SaaS world, which has made it much more cohesive in how leads are generated. A good CRM example, HubSpot, Fab, you might be happy to plug, that does both the marketing aspect and the sales aspect. So you bring it together, and then there's much more transparency to both parties to understand the other party's world because they're connected and they're linked to each other. So on that note, let's get going. I'm excited.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say, it's funny you said that because, and Alyssa, I promise we're going to get into this is the longest intro ever. But I just spoke to somebody this morning who has HubSpot as their CRM, as their sales tool, but they're running their marketing off of a different tool for budgetary reasons. And like I have zero insight as to the impact of marketing. And I found so representative of what this show is about, where it's like, it's where you were mentioning before, the silo, right? Like there's a complete silo. And I can understand why a sales leader would be like, I don't know what marketing, like I can't even see, like even if I tried, I couldn't see what marketing was doing. And therefore, and I find marketers often shoot themselves in the foot by staying in their little bubble. And like Paul mentioned, like this magic box thing, because you do have an impact on it. It's not always easy and one-on-one to, sales is easy, like Paul closed a deal and that that was it. Like, but for marketing, it's a little harder sometimes to show the impact, but it's definitely important to be up there for sure.
Yeah, totally. And I think if we keep in the framework of SMBs or even medium-sized businesses, but those who marketing and sales share the same target, it's an easier conversation to have. There's complexities when the two have different objectives sort of entirely. But when it comes to those who are service-based, B2B based, and the prospect is the same, it's so relevant. Like marketing should use sales as a gauge of the success of their marketing initiatives. To some degree, there are analytics in terms of view, reach, click-through. Sure, there's ways to assess your marketing machine that you've put into place in terms of its success in other ways beyond sales. But first and foremost, the primary metric should be how much sales, how much revenue did our marketing initiatives generate? And in that case, it's a two-part discovery session. So if marketing is doing its analytics properly, it's saying, hey, we generated this many qualified leads for you, sales. So of this many leads, how many converted to sales? And then you look at where the disconnect is. Okay, is it because they were brutal leads that you didn't get a real result? Or is it because there's some maybe just work to be done within the sales process that could be improved, because marketing is delivering qualified leads and they're hitting a bottleneck when it comes to sales in terms of whether that's the proposal process or the follow-through process or whatever that might be. So when the two teams work together, you can find out where there's a slowdown, or not a failure, but like the balls are being dropped a little bit within the context of that machine.
Yeah.
And
instead of pointing fingers, you can figure it out because you're seeing the whole universe. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you can assess too. Marketing can go to sales and say, hey, what were these leads? We generated this many leads. You had this many sales calls, and HubSpot obviously allows you to discover that, right? So at some point, the leads from marketing are being filtered into some kind of sales platform in which the team then makes calls or follows through to actually have a one-on-one sales conversation and turn them into a client. So at what point can you have a conversation, say, hey, what were the people like who came through the door for you guys, and have an honest conversation about that? And I think the way that marketing and sales can work best together, and especially in terms of marketing creating a plan, and this is where sales is really important, sales gets that one-on-one interaction with prospects, whereas marketing does not, unless they're doing focus groups or they're circling back with clients and being like, hey, how'd you find us? Do you like us? Are we good? What do you know? But it's more so sales that has that deep understanding of why someone chose you or didn't choose you, why they lost a prospect and why they gained a prospect. And sales can inform marketing. And if marketing has a better understanding of the needs, wants, pains, gains, impact that the business has on prospects, marketing can then improve the quality of their work to bring in more qualified leads.
Great. Good.
Cool. So how do
Jumping
we build
in.
a marketing plan? Let's just jump
In
in
terms of making
and
a
do this.
marketing plan, I'll give some insight there in terms of how I recommend organizations go about creating a marketing plan. And when I work with marketers or business leaders in a marketing capacity, this is what I recommend. And I think it might be helpful for sales leaders to have a sense of, and not every business does it this way, but this is my recommendation. And it might be helpful for those of us, or for those who are listening in our audience who are business leaders, who are kind of their salesperson predominantly because they're the CEO or maybe the founder of an organization, and they're kind of putting on a marketing hat half the time because they don't really have a marketing lead. So this conversation is meant a little bit for that hybrid person, but I think really helpful for a sales VP too, to have an understanding of, this is what I recommend, at least when I'm a fractional CMO for organizations, if they don't have insight or a background of a marketing person's like process of generating a plan.
Cool.
So the plan comes in almost 3 parts, and I'm preaching what I always do, in that the most important thing for any marketing plan or any marketing strategy is knowing your customer, knowing your target prospect, who makes you the most money, who's most likely to be converted into a sale. And that should be the same person for sales and marketing for the most part. So it's who's that ideal big fish client that we want to nail, that we want to connect with, that we want to have get wind of us and contact our team for a call. And that's really marketing's job. So once they have a really clear understanding who that person is, and I encourage them to connect with the sales team to get a better sense of their perspective on who that person is, so you can make this amazing 2-brained combination of who this individual is. From there, you put together a plan of the best way to connect with this person. And I like to do it by brainstorming as many marketing tactics, business development tactics, communication tactics that you can think of, and just dumping it all in a list. I like to use stickies digitally, just brain dump. And sales team can be a part of this too, because we might have a sense of where you can connect with their prospects, or a better sense of where there could be some follow through from the marketing team on those who fall through the cracks in the sales part. Maybe there's an email funnel of those who are not yet that sales can kick back to marketing, and then marketing can keep drumming up that business and keep grooming those prospects that were not yet, but may eventually come around in 6 months to a year.
So and I feel like sales is so often, sorry to interrupt, but I feel like sales is so often has so much value at that point, because especially if we're just doing a brain dump, right, of everything you could do. And obviously there's always the wise salesperson that thinks they're a marketer and, like, hey, let's just email everybody in the database and stuff like that. But I think because you're in an ideation process, I think that's okay. And I think sales needs to be at that table, because like you said, it's marketing stuff, but it's also biz dev stuff. And it will encourage, I hate that word, but synergies between those two teams, right? And those efforts. Sorry.
Yes, exactly. Brainstorming together details about the prospect to refine that prospect is definitely a group effort. And then, brainstorming all the best ideas in which you can reach and connect with that prospect is awesome for sales to be involved in. And then from there, I recommend, especially if you're a smaller team, and this is a job that marketing could probably do, but I think sharing it with sales too would be valuable as a next step, is to basically prioritize all those initiatives. So I basically make a very simple grid. If you imagine a grid, on the top you have high cost, low cost, and then easy to execute, and difficult to execute, basically. And you put the initiatives in, it's not high cost, low cost. It's makes a big difference. So makes a big impact, makes a low impact. So impact on top, high, impact below, low, easy to do, difficult to do. And then you just pop all the initiatives in those 4 quadrants. And then obviously you build your plan for the most part out of your top 2 quadrants of what makes the biggest impact that might be easy to do, and what makes the biggest impact that might be difficult to do. And by difficult to do, I mean like overhauling our website, because that means there's a marketing cost involved and a bit of time and quite a bit of work and effort and brain power to do that. Easy is, improving our LinkedIn page so it better represents our company. It could be popping up some extra social media posts. So things that are easy to execute. And then from there, you basically put together a marketing plan of taking those top 3, 4, 5 tactical initiatives that the team on whole has decided will be the most valuable things to move forward with to generate our growth goals, whatever those might be. And that becomes your marketing plan. And then from there, you can get more granular in terms of tactical execution, and you assign people jobs and you hire the right people. But that's essentially how it works. And I think it makes sense to share that plan with the sales team too, of saying, hey, here's how we're going to drum up leads for you. Does this feel good? Do you think we're missing anything in terms of from a sales perspective here? How can we integrate it better with sales, with HubSpot, or we're using Salesforce. How do we make sure that connects well with HubSpot? If there's a disconnect in terms of their platforms, you can have that conversation there when it gets to the plan. So you're not executing it and then having this bottleneck disconnect as you execute.
Yeah, and I really like that, because then it's very concrete as to what's going to happen. And I mean, we could argue. I don't know. Paul just disappeared. Paul's like, I'm out of here.
I've turned on the lights. Sorry, I'm listening. I was here.
But what I liked about that, because we're talking about, like why sales should care. Like obviously they'll care because it's part of how leads are going to be brought in, and the brand's going to be recognized as well. But I'm almost seeing, and maybe I'm being too idealistic, but like almost seeing like a joint plan, right? Because part of the initiatives could be, your prospecting and your outreach efforts and your LinkedIn messaging and your cold emails. And I could see this as being a whole congruent biz dev plan, for lack of a better word, which includes marketing initiatives and sales initiatives. And it's almost as if in your marketing plan or whatever, there's a section for what sales is doing, and then they can both see how you're working together to achieve your lead goals.
Yeah, it's true. And I feel like in larger companies, there's a real disconnect as to when you pass off that individual from marketing to sales. So in some cases, you almost need this almost disqualifier middle section. I think we've talked about this before a little bit, of when does marketing actually pass on that name, that contact to have sales, and who picks up. Like say you have a really great lead magnet on your website. People are, the marketing team has ads, so digital ads that they're drumming up leads from. And there's a conversion element in terms of we're inviting people to give us their email for something in return. What's that email list? Like, does that go to sales? Does marketing then need to further disqualify them before it goes to a sales call? Because sales calls take time and energy. They're more labor intensive. Is there a middle section that has to be done to actually figure out if those really are qualified leads, or if they just wanted to download your free item, but they're not really of much value to you?
Yeah, and you're right. We spoke about the middle part, but that's definitely needs to be reviewed. I mean, if anything, yearly as to how that happens. Because I mean, and yeah, you're right. The sales team absolutely needs to get involved in that discussion, because this is about transferring leads over. And how do you determine that a lead is qualified, right? And then sometimes some teams, offline, Alyssa, we're talking about like how busy we were, and I was talking about like the cyclical nature of it. And sometimes some sales, like a lot of businesses are cyclical, whether it's just because there's a down because of the holidays or because of the summer breaks or whatever. And sometimes what I've seen just personally is like salespeople who are in a down period, get less qualified leads because there's less people that are filling out your lead magnets and answering your ads and whatnot. And so they like the idea of being able to go to maybe leads that have not yet been qualified and to do the extra legwork when they're in a downtime. So definitely having a clear idea of like bucketing your leads is super important.
Yep. And then I think it's important to be transparent too in terms of analytics of what we're using to drive success, and sharing that amongst the two teams, so sales leaders are aware of what marketing's using to account for success. Because then you don't have that disconnect of, oh, we had a great time, like our marketing plans were amazing, and sales is like, actually no, because we didn't make any sales off of them, right? So if there's buy-in from the start of, okay, this is how we're assessing whether this is a success or not. Sales team, does that make sense for you? Like, we're assuming that if we bring in this many leads and you're able, assuming you're a superstar salesperson, you're able to convert like 50% of them, are you going to consider this a success? Like, does that mean we're bringing you qualified leads? And if that's the case, and they're like, yeah, they were all great leads, but then for whatever reason they fell off, then it's maybe we should assess the sales situation. Or if the sales team is like, no one I talked to from this marketing initiative resulted in a sale, then there needs to be some reassessment of, okay, maybe we targeted the wrong person, or maybe we, with our messaging, we weren't quite connecting with the right prospect.
Yeah.
Good point.
So there's less finger pointing and more problem solving together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The finger pointing is like definitely a big killer within those groups, right? And that's easy when things go wrong, and then you have like marketing is like, well, look at all these leads, and sales is not doing anything with them, and then sales is like, well, they're all horrible leads, so I'm not going to do anything with them, and then but nobody wins from that, right? Sales are not doing their numbers, marketing and it's actually a double-edged sword, because usually sales ends up not doing their numbers, and marketing looks like they are because they're generating the qualified leads, but there's clearly something wrong, and then that's where the animosity kind of starts building. So I like this problem solving.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's crucial, and the more I hear this, the more I realize that working in silos, it's just not going to happen. You're creating a void. You're creating no man's land for people to blame things, and you're gonna miss the whole point of having the success of the company.
Yeah. And I think ultimately it's a customer experience thing, right? Like if you're siloed, the customer experience is siloed as well. Like, and that's what we tend to forget, right? Like your ads are one thing, blah, blah, blah. And then nobody gets back to you because there's no efficient way of transferring it to sales, or you're sending the salesperson looks at it like, this isn't a good lead, but like these are all gaps in your customer experience, which in the end definitely hinder your sales, because salespeople, customers don't have the patience to wait around for you to decide to call them or to reach out to them or whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, you teach this, Paul, and what when you in your sales consulting work, but it's important too for sales team members to remember that it's their job in a lot of ways to help the larger team to really assess why a prospect turned into a sale or not. And asking the right questions of, oh, hey, why didn't you choose us? Was it a price thing? Was it did this feel like a fit for you? And that's really valuable information, not just for them, obviously, to improve their ability to close a deal, but also if they're discovering that there's a connection or a consistency amongst those quote unquote failures, they should bring that back to the marketing team and say, hey, consistently I've had these guys always say like, oh, but I thought you did this. And then I came to the table in the meeting and you don't do that. And then I was disappointed. And that's, that's not to knock on marketing. It's to come to the table and be like, hey, look, I discovered something that made us have the wrong leads. Here's some great info so you can tweak your messaging or tweak your ads or tweak your content. And marketing wouldn't know that otherwise. So unless there's that transparency, like, you're just doing each other a disservice.
Absolutely. It's key. And we've Fab and I started this podcast how many years ago, Fab? It's almost 3 years, isn't it? Yeah. So when we started this podcast, it was all about bringing marketing and sales together. So and I think it's Fab that once said sales and marketing are the same thing. They're you can't divide them. It's like saying your head is not part. It's like saying your arm and your legs are part of a different entity. You need your legs and you need your arms. It sounds stupid, but it's the way you have to think. It's one symbiotic body. We can maybe just stick procurement on the outside.
I mean, definitely,
it's people. That was just a joke.
I don't think your procurement.
Yeah, but by the sales team members being really transparent about what's working and what's not, they're helping themselves. Because if marketing's bringing you better leads, they make more sales, they have better numbers, they get a bigger bonus, everyone's happy, everyone's growing. So it's almost like the onus is on them to pass that information back, because if they don't, they're just hurting themselves, really.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and it's definitely, and it's a fact check. Like there's so many levels of quality there, because it's like, it's also then it's like, I remember being in a situation when I was in charge of demand gen, where it's like the need, the volume was so high that the quality of the leads was going down, and we sat with the sales team and they're like, why are you sending us these leads? I'm like, well, the quantity that you need is so high. And so then I'm pretty sure the discussion didn't end up very healthy, but it's more of a traditional sales marketing conflict. But but you know, then it's also enlightening for the sales team to be like, well wait, why do we need so many leads that now marketing is forced to give us these less qualified leads? And that's an indication to work with somebody like Paul or whatever, that maybe the part of the sales process and part of the training and part of the coaching isn't up to par. So that's, you know, that's how also part of that discussion with marketing can highlight certain elements also within the sales team.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
And, you know, and often, and Fab and I have had this conversation. A lot of people don't even understand their sales process. A lot of what, well, less now, but a lot of people just go with a gut feeling and an instinct. So if you're on gut feeling and instinct, it's very hard to explain to anyone what's going on. So you much less to marketing or to anyone. You're just like, well, how do you do yourself? I don't know. Just does this. What kind of clients do you want? Well, I don't know. Ones that buy, you know. So sales should be put, like, get to work and tell us what kind of clients you are, or else marketing can't do its job properly. And you know, work together. You know, no more silos.
Yeah, exactly. And I think marketing shouldn't be on its high horse either. So they need to be open to getting that feedback, because marketing likes to think of themselves as the keeper of the brand, the keeper of the messaging, the creator of the messaging and the brand. But you only can build a strong brand if you have a deep understanding of your customer. And that deep understanding of a customer actually comes from sales. You can do focus groups galore, but a salesperson who's in one-on-one conversations all the time with prospects, who's landing deals, who's keeping relationships with clients, knows them best. And so a good marketer looks to their sales team to get deep insights on prospects.
I've got to say, I've been getting this vision throughout our whole conversation. I get this flashback of Mad Men, and I'm seeing how, you know, in the old world of marketing or advertising, they didn't ask much to the client. They just sort of thought up of a great idea and they put it out there. And because probably advertising was so new and B2C clients were so naive and bought anything, that the 50s were like this beautiful era where you could, you know, spoon feed anything to anyone. So that's probably where the whole era of, well, marketing doesn't need to know what's going on, because we'll tell you what you need, you know. But obviously in a B2B world, which is what we're talking about most of the time. Yeah. In a B2B world, the product and the service is often very complex, and also the client is much more complex. So there needs to be a symbiotic relation. And honestly, where, you know, in a B2C world, you know, 50 years ago, you know, the consumer and the marketing was almost driving the cool factor, so the consumer wanted to join it. Now it's like they're much closer together, and sales and marketing need to work much closer together, because there's a specific purpose to what's going on, and it's very often utilitarian. You know, in the B2B world, it's very rare that you're selling a sexy product. You're selling something that's going to help your client move objectives forward, and sales and marketing are a lot closer together in that world. So that whole romantic vision of the 50s, where, well, there was a romantic vision of the marketing advertising, and there was also a horrible view of what salespeople were in the 50s, right? Like kicking tires and ramming things down people's throats. So it's like a Glenn Ross thing. Whereas now, I think, you know, sales has moved much closer in their goal and their desire to help the client, rather than just put a buck in their pocket.
Yeah, it's true. And I think there's definitely a different world between, like, what we know of as the Mad Men style, or even the large Fortune 500s that we maybe come from, where it's a difference between, like, packaged goods reality, where your end user is different than your distributor or your retailer. And so for that reason, sometimes there's a disconnect between sales and marketing in terms of who their priority is with, in terms of selling to. And that's where there tends to be a bit more clashing heads. But I think it's quite easy for a very symbiotic relationship to be developed in a growing B2B, service-based, or even product-based business, where the prospect is the same on both sides. Yeah. And maybe it's up to, like, a senior leader being a general manager, or maybe sometimes you have a VP of sales and marketing at smaller organizations, and they maybe have junior directors underneath them. It's important for that high up leader to build that symbiotic, connected relationship from the get-go.
So what we're really saying
here is their salesperson and their marketing lead are like BFFs.
Yeah, exactly. So what we're really saying here is, to build a proper marketing plan, you have to include sales.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
I think in a lot of times,
yeah.
yeah. And I think it's not always, it's doing the core work and having regular touch points.
Yeah.
Because I think some salespeople will be like, I do not want to be a part of the marketing plan. But if marketing brings them in, or they have touch points where here we're going to do brainstorming together to make sure the machine runs smoothly. So they're almost like machine meetings. If you think the whole customer journey being like one long machine, we're going to have strategic machine chats, and then we're going to go off and execute our separate plans and
Yeah.
keep connected and share them and get each other's perspectives. But having consistent tap-ins of, is the machine working for you? No. Okay, let's figure it out. Is the machine working for you? Yeah. Okay. Let's like, right. So yeah, it's talking about the machine, I would say, or the organism that is. So.
And it's also, you know, having worked with a lot of different organizations, I think for some, you know, a qualified lead, you know, I like really that part of our discussion that they were talking about, like after the person fills the form or interacts with our chat or whatnot, is you know, for some organizations it's really easy to qualify a lead because a lot of the information that they need to qualify the lead, obviously beyond before like all the needs and the pain points and all that stuff that sales does, it's a lot easier. But for some organizations it's actually really hard to qualify the lead from the outside, just because, you know, you're selling accounts receivable software. It's like really hard to understand what's broken internally without having sales. And so by having those touch points, you can actually have a very honest discussion about, well, this is as far as marketing can go. Like, we can get you somebody who's like a CFO or whatever, but you know, beyond that, it's going to be really impossible for us to go see what software they have. And but if you take somebody like me, like I could just go on somebody's site and know right away if they're using HubSpot or not. And so if they're not, I know what kind of conversation to have, and if they are, I know what kind of conversation to have. And so that's what I like about also including sales and having those regular touch points, is that your post conversion can become very dynamic and adaptive and hopefully improve over time.
Yes, exactly. And that's where it's up to the senior leader to make those, you know, let's talk about the journey, let's talk about the organism on whole chats, because sometimes people get precious of, oh, I have to bring sales into my marketing meetings, what? And versus the same way of sales, oh, why do we bring marketing? Like, they don't understand what we do. So it's taking it to a different place in terms of, okay, we're going to work as a team to work up here right now, because we need to connect better and speak better together. As one example, because I take it to a smaller level often because I'm working sometimes with smaller teams, usually let's say I'm the fractional CMO for a small business, and I'm mainly working with the founder or the general manager who's predominantly focused on sales. And the reason I'm brought in is because they're not as comfortable and confident in marketing. We had one example where we were doing ads. So we had a digital ad campaign, and my client was able to say directly, like, hey, I keep getting like some garbage leads. They always keep, you know, they keep saying this in particular, and they're not quite the kind I was looking for. So when he shared that with me, immediately I was able to go back to our ads team and say, hey guys, we need to tweak this. How can we tweak our landing page to make sure we disqualify these people and garner more interest in these people? And that's a micro version. But when you think about that on a macro level with a large organization, that conversation still needs to happen, but it doesn't. And so then marketing keeps generating the wrong content, and they keeps getting bad leads. And so it's easy to do when there's just
clocks out, and then
but it's hard to do when there's a team of 20.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Paul, I know you have a hard stop in 10 minutes.
In summary.
Let's can you, Alyssa, I think like your 3 points I think were really interesting. Can you maybe summarize with that?
Yeah. So in summary, I would say, as a marketing person, I think sales is incredibly valuable. And the insight that sales has, marketers should.
She's just saying that, Fab. She's just saying that.
I'm just saying that to appease you. And at the same time, I think sales should really take it upon themselves to inform and support their marketing teams, because they have insight that the marketing team does not. And so if both are open to exchanging insights and information, you have a way more successful sales, selling, revenue generating growth machine that is your organization. And in terms of building a plan, I think sales being involved at the onset to really get a clear understanding who the prospect is, and a clear understanding of some of those top awareness driving business development driving initiatives is really helpful for the sales and marketing team to come together to do.
Great.
Awesome.
So can I add something here?
Yeah.
Coming from the sales perspective, so I love this because I think what we've really said here is to build a proper marketing plan. You obviously have to understand the whole universe of what you're trying to achieve, and that involves many players in the company, not just the marketing team alone. And to me, it's funny, I'd never thought of it that way before, honestly. And I thought that it's good to have synergies, but when you guys are laying it out so obviously today, it's like, well, yeah, well, of course, this is logical. You have to do it this way. So yeah, thanks, Alyssa. I think that was very informative and really interesting from a sales guy's perspective. Fab, Fab, you must love this because it brings both the worlds of HubSpot together.
So 2 out of the 3, it does. To me, I could see it like without trying to make anybody feel bad. Like teams that neglect marketing always have a harder time with their sales, and it's often a matter of time, right? Like sometimes like sales is doing well enough that things are going, and then at some point they're just like they hit against a wall, and then they're like, I don't know what else to do at this point. And often there's work to be done with somebody like you, Paul, to like review how sales is doing things. But more often than not, it's because you're missing a whole chunk of the customer's journey, right? You're just kind of hoping that your salespeople are cold calling enough that they're reaching the right people instead of like speaking to the people that are actually out there, determining if they already have a problem. Do they are potentially? So if you're cold calling them, they're like, no, I don't have a problem, I'm good. But if you're putting content out there, if you're doing your marketing, if you're doing that, you're able to like bring them to your environment. And so, yeah, to me, it's clear, like when you take a step back, and I understand that both teams operate very differently, and it's normal that there's friction. But I can see clearly the companies that have the most success are the ones that do both and combine both. Because you can't just win off of cold calls. It's just the reality. Just like in the same way, depending on what you're selling, you can't just win off of inbound leads either, right? Like, you need both.
Yeah. Outbound
but I think with the reality of sales stacks today, like it's easier and easier to get them to come together too. I've got to say.
Yeah. We're not going to plug HubSpot too much, but that's definitely one of the reasons I like it so much is because it's all there. It's right in front of me. There's no integration to do. It's all on the same
day. It's a place where they can come together.
Yeah, both departments can appreciate each other's data too. So there's great synergy, the word you love.
And it forces transparency, and I think that's the best thing. Any platform that forces transparency and forces the two teams to problem solve and work together because they're both operating in the same space is valuable.
Absolutely.
Cool. Alyssa, it's always fun. We'll see you next month.
Thanks,
all right,
folks.
see you next month.
Thanks,
Take
Alyssa.
care, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.